In the relentless urban symphony of New York City, where towering ambitions cast long shadows over quiet lives, acts of genuine kindness can feel like fleeting melodies in a deafening roar. Imagine a young woman barely out of her teens, navigating the grit and grind, yet radiating a warmth that cuts through the city's perpetual chill. This is Elara Hayes, a waitress in a forgotten corner of the metropolis, whose simple acts of compassion were about to ripple outwards, touching a life as distant from her own as the stars are from the sidewalks. Prepare to witness how in a city of millions, one heart, generous and unassuming, can illuminate the extraordinary power of everyday goodness. Elara Hayes, at just 23, carried dreams that stretched far beyond the cramped confines of her present reality. Her life, for now, was tethered to the worn vinyl booths and the ever-present aroma of frying bacon at Rosie's Rendezvous, a diner clinging to life in a less-than-glamorous pocket of New York City. The diner itself was a study in faded glory. Chipped Formica countertops reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, and the neon open sign in the window flickered intermittently, mirroring the precariousness of Elara's own aspirations. Yet, despite the chipped paint on the walls and the quiet desperation that sometimes hung in the air, Elara possessed an inner radiance that no amount of hardship could dim. She wasn't just adept at serving lukewarm coffee and greasy spoon specials. Elara had a rare, almost intuitive gift for making each person who sat in her section feel genuinely seen, truly valued, even amidst the hurried anonymity of city life. Despite the grueling double shifts and the meager tips that barely kept her afloat, Elara maintained a quiet ritual, a habit that subtly set her apart in the bustling urban landscape. Every night, as the city lights began to blaze and her shift drew to a close, she would carefully gather the day's leftover food from the diner's kitchen, perfectly edible portions that would otherwise be discarded, and embark on her walk home. This wasn't just a quick commute, it was a deliberate route, chosen because it snaked through streets where the city's forgotten souls sought refuge in doorways and under awnings. She distributed the food to the homeless individuals she encountered along the way, offering a warm smile and a few kind words with each offering. To Elara, it was a small, almost insignificant act of human decency, a way to ease her conscience and share the abundance, however limited, she had access to. But to those shivering, hungry individuals who received her humble offerings, it meant something immeasurably more, a fleeting moment of warmth, a tangible reminder that they were not entirely invisible, not completely forgotten by the indifferent city. One evening, particularly bleak and unforgiving, the rain descended upon New York with a vengeance. It was a bone-chilling downpour, a relentless curtain of water that transformed the city streets into slick, reflecting rivers. Elara hurried home after her shift, her thin raincoat offering little protection against the biting wind and the soaking rain. She clutched her worn jacket tighter around herself, her shoulders hunched against the elements, her thoughts preoccupied with the mounting bills and the ever-present worry for her younger brother. As she navigated the rain-swept sidewalks, her gaze fell upon a small, huddled figure seeking meager shelter under the overhang of a bus stop. Drawing closer, she realized it was a young boy, no older than 8, his small frame trembling uncontrollably in the cold, damp air. His clothes were thin and inadequate, soaked through and clinging to his skin, offering no warmth against the November chill. Elara paused, her heart constricting with a pang of empathy. She couldn't just walk by. "Hey there," she said gently, her voice soft and reassuring, kneeling beside him on the rain-streaked pavement. "Are you okay?" She searched his face, pale and pinched with cold and fear. "Where are your parents? Are you lost?" The boy looked up, his eyes wide and luminous in the dim light, reflecting a depth of vulnerability that belied his young age. I don't have anyone," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "I'm just hungry." Without a second thought, driven by an instinct as natural as breathing, Elara reached out and took his small, ice-cold hand in hers. "Come with me," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Let's get you somewhere warm." She gently led him back in the direction of the diner, her own weariness forgotten in the face of the boy's immediate need. The rain continued to lash down, soaking them both to the bone as they retraced her steps. But Elara barely noticed the discomfort. Her focus was entirely on the shivering child beside her. Once they were back inside the familiar warmth of Rosie's Rendezvous, the comforting clatter of dishes and the murmur of late-night conversations a stark contrast to the harsh storm outside, she quickly wrapped the boy in a thick, warm blanket from the diner's meager supply. She sat him down at a quiet booth and hurried to the kitchen, returning moments later with a steaming bowl of hearty tomato soup, the rich aroma filling the air. As the boy ate, his small face, previously etched with fear and exhaustion, began to soften, a faint flicker of light returning to his eyes. For the first time that night, amidst the ever-present anxieties of her own life, Ilara felt a deep, resonant sense of warmth bloom in her chest, a quiet satisfaction that transcended the biting cold and the relentless rain. Unbeknownst to Ilara, as she extended her simple act of compassion, she was not alone in her corner of the city. Across the street, shrouded in the anonymity of the urban night, a sleek, obsidian-black car was parked, its engine idling softly, a silent observer of the unfolding scene. Inside the luxurious vehicle, shielded from the rain and the city's grit, sat Julian Vance, a billionaire magnate renowned for his razor-sharp business acumen and his fiercely guarded private life. He was a man accustomed to controlling empires and navigating complex financial landscapes, but tonight he was seeking a different kind of clarity. He had been driving aimlessly through the city's less frequented areas after a particularly grueling day of high-stakes negotiations, hoping the relative quiet of the late-night streets would offer a semblance of peace, a respite from the relentless pressures of his world. But what he found instead was far more compelling. At first, his attention had been piqued by a flicker of movement in the rain-swept street, a fleeting curiosity drawing his gaze towards the unassuming diner across the way. He noticed a young woman, her silhouette outlined against the warm glow spilling from the diner's windows, kneeling beside a small huddled figure beneath the bus stop shelter. Initially it was just detached curiosity, a momentary distraction in the urban tableau. Why was a young woman out in this torrential rain, interacting with a homeless boy? He watched, his interest slowly deepening, as Ilara gently took the boy's hand and led him towards the diner. But as Julian continued to observe, witnessing Ilara usher the boy inside, wrap him in a blanket and offer him food with such tender care, he found himself utterly captivated. He couldn't look away. Her actions, so utterly genuine, so devoid of any self-serving motive, so purely selfless, struck a chord deep within him, resonating with a part of himself he had long suppressed, perhaps even forgotten. Who is she? Julian murmured to himself, his gaze fixed on the brightly lit windows of Rosie's Rendezvous, the rain blurring the edges of his vision. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, years spent navigating the cutthroat world of corporate titans and soulless deals, Julian Vance felt something stir within him, a fragile, nascent emotion, a sense of wonder, a profound admiration he couldn't quite articulate, couldn't quite categorize. He reached for a pen and a small notepad he kept in the car, his movements uncharacteristically hesitant, and scribbled down the name of the diner, Rosie's Rendezvous, committing it to memory as if it were a vital piece of information, a key to unlocking some hidden truth. Then, with a lingering glance at the unassuming diner, he instructed his driver to proceed, the sleek black car gliding away into the rain-soaked night, leaving Rosie's Rendezvous and Ilara behind. But the indelible image of her, soaked to the bone in the downpour, yet radiating an inner warmth as she extended kindness to a stranger, stayed with him, imprinted on his mind long after he returned to the sterile grandeur of his luxurious penthouse, a stark and compelling contrast to the cold, calculated world he inhabited. The ensuing days blurred into a relentless cycle of demanding shifts and quiet desperation for Ilara. She found herself constantly juggling double shifts at Rosie's, the endless stream of orders and demanding customers a constant pressure. Added to this was the heavy weight of responsibility for her younger brother, Finn. Finn, still in high school, relied entirely on Ilara's meager earnings to cover his school fees, textbooks, and the basic necessities that their strained budget barely allowed for. Between the physical exhaustion and the constant financial worries, Ilara barely had a spare moment to dwell on the events of that rainy night, or the anonymous homeless boy she had helped. Yet, the memory of his grateful smile, the fleeting warmth in his eyes as he ate the soup, lingered in the quiet corners of her mind, a small ember of hope that flickered amidst the anxieties, giving her a fragile strength to push through the bone-deep exhaustion, to face each new day with a semblance of optimism. Meanwhile, in his world of towering skyscrapers and million-dollar deals, Julian Vance found himself inexplicably, persistently drawn back to the image of the waitress in the rain. He possessed everything that money could buy: power, influence, material wealth beyond measure. Yet he couldn't shake the potent image of Ilara, soaked and shivering in the relentless downpour, offering warmth and selfless kindness to someone who possessed nothing, someone deemed invisible by the vast majority of the city. It wasn't merely her actions that captivated him. It was something deeper, something more elusive, the palpable purity of her heart, the unwavering genuineness that radiated from her in that fleeting encounter. In his world of calculated strategies and carefully constructed facades, such authentic goodness felt like a rare and precious anomaly, a beacon in the moral murk of his own existence. He found himself needing, almost desperately, to know more about her, to understand the source of such unadulterated compassion in a world that seemed increasingly defined by cynicism and self-interest. Driven by this uncharacteristic impulse, one evening Julian made a decisive choice. Shedding his usual power suits and corporate attire, he opted for a more understated, though still impeccably tailored dark suit that felt subtly out of place amidst the worn decor of a neighborhood diner. He walked through the unassuming doors of Rosie's Rendezvous, the familiar bell above the entrance jingling softly, its cheerful chime momentarily announcing his unexpected arrival, drawing Ilara's attention from behind the counter. She was balancing a precarious tray laden with steaming plates, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, a few strands escaping and framing her face, slightly frizzy from the humid air emanating from the kitchen. But even amidst the weariness etched around her eyes, her smile, when it bloomed, was as genuinely radiant, as warm and welcoming as he remembered from that rain-soaked night. Julian froze for a fleeting moment just inside the entrance, a strange sense of familiarity, almost recognition, washing over him as he took in her features, her unassuming grace. Ilara greeted him with the same effortless warmth, the same genuine hospitality she offered to every customer who crossed the diner's threshold, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. "Welcome to Rosie's Rendezvous," she said, her voice cheerful and bright despite the subtle weariness he detected beneath the surface. "Have a seat anywhere you like." Julian chose a corner booth, sliding into the worn vinyl cushions, his gaze instinctively, almost involuntarily, following her every move as she navigated the diner with practiced ease. He observed her interactions with the other patrons, noticing the consistency of her kindness, the genuine warmth she extended to each individual, echoing the selfless compassion he had witnessed on that rainy night. He watched as she patiently helped an elderly customer meticulously count out her change, her voice soft and reassuring. He saw her offer a free coffee refill to a young mother struggling to soothe a fussy baby, her gesture a small act of understanding in the face of everyday hardship. He even paused to check on a regular customer, a solitary older man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter, who seemed unusually quiet and withdrawn, her concern evident in her gentle inquiry. Each subtle interaction, each small act of kindness, served only to confirm what Julian already instinctively knew. This unassuming young woman was, in her own quiet way, extraordinary. When his simple meal was finished, Julian accepted the handwritten bill from Ilara with a murmured thanks, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. He handed her a credit card, but as she turned to leave to process the payment, he subtly, almost furtively, slipped a thick, cream-colored envelope under the edge of his plate, a silent offering hidden in plain sight. Ilara, preoccupied with the other customers and the diner's bustling rhythm, didn't notice the envelope until she returned to clear his table after he had departed. As she collected the dishes, her fingers brushed against the unexpected thickness beneath the plate. Lifting it, she discovered the heavy envelope. Intrigued, she slipped it open, her eyes widening in disbelief as she unfolded the crisp paper within. Inside, nestled between the folds, was a substantial stack of crisp, new $100 bills, far, far more than any conceivable tip, even for the most extravagant order. Her hands trembled slightly as she counted the money, her mind racing with a whirlwind of questions. Who was this mysterious man? Why would a stranger leave such an inexplicably generous, almost absurdly large tip? Driven by a sudden, urgent impulse, she ran outside, her apron strings flapping behind her, scanning the rain-slicked street for any sign of the enigmatic benefactor. But he was already gone. The sleek black car she had fleetingly noticed earlier, the one parked across the street on that rainy night, was nowhere in sight, vanished into the anonymity of the city. For the rest of her shift, and long into the quiet hours of the night, Lily couldn't shake the mystery of the generous stranger, his quiet observation, and the inexplicable gift he had left behind. Who was he? And why her? The next morning Rosie's Rendezvous buzzed with its usual chaotic energy, the breakfast rush in full swing. Ilara tied on her familiar, slightly stained apron, the routine movements a comforting anchor in the swirling uncertainties of her thoughts. She plunged into the familiar rhythm of her shift, pouring coffee, taking orders, navigating the crowded aisles between tables, the physical exertion temporarily pushing the lingering questions about the previous night's mysterious tip to the periphery of her awareness. Yet, the thought of the homeless boy she had helped just days prior still lingered, a quiet undercurrent beneath the surface of her busy day. She hoped, with a quiet, unspoken prayer, that he had found a safe and warm place to rest his head, a respite from the harsh realities of the streets. But her immediate focus was pulled back to the present, to the demanding customers filing in for their morning dose of caffeine and greasy comfort food. Around midday, as the breakfast rush began to subside and the lunch crowd started to trickle in, the diner's front door swung open again, a subtle chime announcing the arrival of a new patron. A tall, sharply dressed man entered, his tailored suit and impeccably polished shoes subtly, yet undeniably, standing out amongst the more casually attired diners. Ilara didn't immediately notice him. Her attention was momentarily fixed on an elderly couple struggling to navigate the crowded entrance. But then the hostess, young and flustered, approached her, whispering urgently, "Ilara, that gentleman over there? He asked specifically for you to be his server." Ilara glanced up in surprise, her gaze landing on the man now being seated at a booth near the window. She didn't immediately recognize him, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. But as their eyes met across the bustling diner, a strange, almost unsettling sense of familiarity tugged at the edges of her memory, a faint echo of an encounter she couldn't quite place. The man smiled warmly, a genuine, engaging smile that seemed to soften the sharp angles of his face, his gaze lingering on her, not in a predatory way, but with an intensity that suggested he was studying her, observing her with a purpose she couldn't yet discern. Ilara shrugged off the odd, unsettling feeling, attributing it to fatigue and lingering stress, and approached his table, her notepad and pen held in a practiced hand. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice carrying its usual friendly, welcoming tone. "What can I get for you today?" The man hesitated for a moment, his gaze still fixed on her, a thoughtful expression in his eyes before replying, "I'll take the special of the day." He paused, a subtle, almost playful inflection entering his voice. "But only if you promise to take a break and join me for coffee later." Ilara blinked, caught completely off guard by his unexpected request. Her carefully rehearsed waitress script faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry," she stammered, slightly flustered, "but I don't usually take breaks during my shift. Is there anything else you'd like with your order?" The man chuckled, a low, resonant sound that held a hint of amusement. "Just the special for now," he said, handing her the menu back with a gentle gesture. As Ilara walked away to place his order, a persistent, nagging feeling remained, a sense that something about this man, his demeanor, his gaze, was subtly yet significantly different. It was as if he knew her, knew something about her, but was deliberately choosing not to reveal it, leaving her to grapple with a disquieting sense of recognition that hovered just beyond the reach of her conscious memory. As the meal progressed, Julian Vance observed Ilara with an almost anthropological intensity, his gaze discreet yet unwavering. He watched her navigate the lunchtime rush with effortless grace, her movements fluid and efficient. He saw how she treated every customer, from the impatient businessman grabbing a quick lunch to the chatty retirees lingering over coffee, with the same unwavering patience and genuine kindness, regardless of how busy or stressful the diner became. She carried heavy trays laden with dishes and drinks with practiced ease, her smile never faltering, even when faced with the occasional grumpy or demanding diner. He noticed how she instinctively checked on everyone's tables, anticipating their needs, ensuring they were satisfied, her attentiveness extending beyond the mere perfunctory duties of her job. To Julian, a man accustomed to observing human behavior in the high-stakes arena of corporate power, it was abundantly clear that Ilara wasn't simply hardworking. She possessed a rare and invaluable quality, a genuine, deeply ingrained compassion that permeated every aspect of her interactions with the world. When she brought him his bill, presented with a warm smile and a quiet "thank you," Julian reached into his wallet, his fingers brushing against the crisp business card he had prepared. He pulled out a credit card, placing it on the billfold, but as she turned to leave, her attention already shifting to another waiting customer, he stopped her, his voice quiet but firm. "Wait," he said, his tone carrying a subtle undercurrent of urgency. Ilara paused, turning back, tilting her head slightly, her expression a mixture of polite inquiry and mild curiosity. "Yes." The man leaned forward slightly, bridging the small gap between them, his gaze direct and penetrating. "Do you remember helping a homeless boy on the street last week?" Ilara's eyes widened in surprise, recognition dawning, the pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicking into place. A faint blush rose to her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and a dawning understanding. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, a tremor of emotion underlying her words. "I do." How do you know about that?" He smiled knowingly, a gentle, reassuring smile that put her slightly at ease. "Let's just say, I saw something that day." He paused, his gaze holding hers, conveying a depth of sincerity that resonated deeply within her. I saw a young woman who went out of her way in the pouring rain to help someone in need, someone completely vulnerable and alone. He shook his head slightly, a gesture of quiet admiration. I was profoundly impressed by your compassion, Ilara. Ilara blushed deeper, feeling a wave of heat rise in her face, suddenly self-conscious under the weight of his intense gaze and his unexpected praise. It was nothing really, she mumbled, looking down, feeling slightly awkward. He needed help and I just did what anyone should do. No, the man said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. Not everyone would have done what you did, Ilara. Most people, he paused, his gaze sweeping briefly around the bustling diner, most people would have walked by without a second thought. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a crisp, formal-looking document, along with the bill, placing both on the edge of the table within Ilara's reach. This is for you, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. Open it, after I leave. Ilara stared at the folded paper, her brow furrowed in confusion, her heart beginning to race with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. But too polite, too ingrained with years of customer service etiquette to refuse, she simply nodded silently, her gaze fixed on the mysterious offering. She watched, a sense of mounting bewilderment washing over her as the man stood, gave her one last lingering smile, a smile that felt both knowing and deeply appreciative, and walked out of the restaurant, disappearing as quickly and quietly as he had arrived, leaving her alone with the enigmatic paper and a heart pounding with unanswered questions. Her curiosity, now an insistent, almost overwhelming force, got the better of her. As soon as she was sure he was gone, she quickly unfolded the note, her hands trembling slightly with anticipation. Inside, nestled within the crisp folds, was a check. A check for an unbelievable, staggering amount, $50,000. Beneath the eye-popping sum, there was a brief, handwritten message, penned in elegant, flowing script. Your kindness has inspired me. Use this to create the future you deserve. A grateful stranger. Ilara's heart leaped into her throat, a gasp escaping her lips. She clutched the check to her chest, her hands shaking uncontrollably, her mind reeling, struggling to comprehend the sheer magnitude of the unbelievable gift. She instinctively ran outside again, scanning the street, desperation lending speed to her feet, searching for any sign of the man, any clue to his identity. But he was once again gone, vanished without a trace, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, clutching a check for a life-altering sum of money, her mind swirling with 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was he? Why would he bestow such an unbelievable gift upon her, a complete stranger? And why, amidst the swirling confusion, did he seem so strangely familiar? That night, as she sat alone in her tiny, sparsely furnished apartment, the check for $50,000 lying on her worn kitchen table like a surreal dream, Ilara couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious benefactor. The sheer improbability of it all felt overwhelming, almost fantastical. She desperately wanted to return the check, to explain that it was far too much money for her to possibly accept, that it must be some kind of mistake, a bizarre misunderstanding. But there was no return address on the formal check, no contact information attached to the handwritten note, and she had absolutely no idea how to even begin to find him, this enigmatic, grateful stranger, who had so inexplicably altered the course of her life. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, gradually, the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility, a fragile hope taking root in the fertile ground of her dreams. Ilara's life began to subtly yet profoundly change. With the unexpected windfall, she cautiously, responsibly, paid off the mountain of accumulated debts that had been weighing her down for so long, a collective sigh of relief escaping her as each bill was settled. She then started to carefully, diligently, save the remaining sum, nurturing a long-held, almost forgotten dream that had flickered within her for years, the dream of opening her own small cafe. A cafe that wouldn't just be another trendy coffee shop in the city's endless sprawl, but a warm, welcoming haven where everyone, regardless of their social standing or their ability to pay, including the homeless individuals she encountered on her nightly walks, could find a hot meal, a kind word, and a genuine smile. Yet, even as her practical plans took shape, as she began to envision the layout of her dream cafe and research potential locations, the lingering mystery of the man who had given her this incredible chance, this extraordinary opportunity to turn her life around, remained an unanswered question that echoed in the quiet moments of her days and nights. Then, one ordinary afternoon, as she was walking home from another long, tiring shift at Rosie's Rendezvous, her thoughts once again drifting towards her cafe dreams and the enigmatic stranger who had made them seem suddenly, tantalizingly possible. A sleek black car, undeniably familiar, pulled up smoothly beside her on the bustling sidewalk. The tinted window rolled down silently, and there he was, the generous stranger from the restaurant booth, his gaze warm and engaging, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I hoped I'd find you walking this way," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet warmth she remembered, a hint of a grin widening his smile. Ilara stopped dead in her tracks, her heart leaping against her ribs, a mixture of surprise, recognition, and a sudden surge of nervous energy coursing through her veins. "You, again?" she stammered, her voice barely audible above the city's din. Why did you give me that money? Who are you?" The man stepped out of the car, his movements fluid and graceful despite his height, his expression turning serious, yet remaining undeniably kind. "I owe you an explanation, Ilara," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, his gaze meeting hers directly. "My name is Julian Vance. I'm the CEO of Vance Enterprises." Ilara's jaw dropped, her mind struggling to process the sheer weight of the name. Vance Enterprises. One of the biggest, most powerful corporations in the entire country. And Julian Vance, he was a well-known billionaire, a figure synonymous with wealth, power, and almost mythical success. "I didn't tell you who I was at the diner," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "because I wanted to see how you'd react." He paused, a thoughtful expression crossing his features. "I've spent years building wealth, accumulating influence, navigating the complexities of the business world. But in all my years I've never encountered anyone as genuinely selfless, as purely compassionate as you. Helping that homeless boy in the rain, it wasn't just a fleeting act of kindness, Ilara. It showed me who you truly are at your core." Ilara was utterly speechless, her mind reeling, struggling to reconcile the image of the powerful billionaire standing before her with the simple act of kindness she had barely given a second thought to. "But why?" she finally managed to whisper, her voice thick with emotion. "Why would someone like you care about me? I'm just a waitress." Julian smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that seemed to bridge the vast chasm of their disparate worlds. "Ilara," he said, his voice soft but firm, "you're far, far more than just a waitress. You have a heart that money can't buy, a spirit that wealth can't corrupt. And I believe," he paused, his gaze sweeping over her face, "I believe the world desperately needs more people like you." He reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a different envelope, heavier and more substantial than the first. He handed it to her, his gaze unwavering. "This is a deed," he explained, his voice quiet but resonant, "to a small cafe downtown. It's yours now, Ilara. Consider it an investment in someone who truly deserves it." Tears welled up in Ilara's eyes, blurring her vision, her throat tightening with overwhelming emotion. She tried to refuse, to stammer out protests, to explain that she couldn't possibly accept such an extravagant gift. But Julian gently, firmly insisted, his gaze holding hers, conveying a depth of sincerity that brooked no argument. "Just promise me one thing, Ilara," he said, his voice low and earnest. "Promise me you'll keep being the person who inspired me. Promise me you'll keep helping others, keep sharing that extraordinary kindness with the world." From that day forward, Ilara's life was irrevocably, beautifully transformed. Her cafe, Ilara's Embrace, became a haven, a warm and welcoming sanctuary for those in need, just as she had always dreamed. It was a place where everyone was treated with dignity and respect, where a hot meal and a kind word were always freely offered. And though she never fully understood the intricate workings of fate that had brought Julian Vance, the powerful billionaire, into her humble life, she knew one thing with absolute certainty, a truth that resonated deep within her soul. Kindness, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, possessed an extraordinary transformative power, the power to change not just one life but perhaps even the world.